Hey folks, in today's video we're going to be taking a look at the new historical characters that are coming to Crusader Kings 3 as part of the Roads to Power update, and on top of that we're also going to cover stories, which are some mini campaigns that are coming to 4 of these historical characters. So we're just going to get straight into it as always, but do hit that like button if you do enjoy the video today. So what are historical characters? These are characters that are going to be on the map in Crusader Kings. Well, I say they're going to be on the map, they're going to appear during your gameplay. So something they've long felt absent from the game is certain historical figures appearing as the game progresses. They're not talking about historical leaders like Barbarossa, Mansa Musa, kings of England, kings of France, things like that, you know, like big historical kings. They're not going to suddenly kind of force them into the game when you're playing. What this is going to be is historical characters that weren't rulers for the most part. So great poets, scientists, scholars, commanders, tricksters of history, as they put it, those without the lineage of nobility to back them up. And I think this does link back to unlanded gameplay very well. And in the update following Roads to Power's release, you'll be able to see certain historical, well-known figures appear across the map, which you can employ as part of your realm, or in certain cases, if you own Roads to Power, you're actually going to be able to go out and adventure as these characters. You're going to get the option to either stay where you are, employ them into your realm, or there's actually going to be an option saying like, nope, I'm going to give up my realm, I'm going to give up my dynasty, and I'm going to go play as El Cid and then carry on his adventures. So I think that's pretty cool. A bit of a departure from what we've always seen historically with Crusader Kings, when it was all about, for the most part, you're this dynasty. When you don't have this dynasty, the game is over. This is actually going outside of that a little bit, and I don't mind that. I think changing up the formula a little bit is pretty cool. And we're going to look through some of these characters. Now, they do say there is over 100 of these, so I'll put some of them on the screen as we're talking through. They did show off a whole bunch of them in one of the dev diaries recently. The first one you can see here is Hildegard von Bingen, and they're going to talk about this system through kind of like her character. So as you can see on the screen in the moment, this event kind of spawns up when she appears on the map, so you will get a little bit of history about her. You can see some blue text on there. That is going to give you your historical background about who she was. And then the text at the top is just explaining her appearing through the echoes of history, as it says here. A pious and accomplished theologian known as Hildegard von Bingen is currently wandering our realm in search of employ. And then you can obviously choose to employ her, or you can, as I say, play as her, or even just say, who cares? And she carries on wandering around the map, and everyone has a good time with that. So a pretty cool event, and you do get those options. They do say characters will appear in their historical place of birth or their best approximation of it. Hildegard will appear in the Barony of Worms, for example. By default, you'll only be notified if they appear in your domain or if they are an extremely well-known character, and if you are the liege of any vassal holding that barony. This can be altered in the game rules should you wish to, so you can say default. I guess you can turn it on and you always get notified where they are, or you can turn it off and then you just find them as you're kind of like exploring through the game and you just bump into them without any prior knowledge. And then really where this system really goes up into another level is that, you know, these are historical characters, but it would be no fun if they were really static, always spawned in the same place, always did the exact same thing. As they say here, no 2 games of Crusader Kings are the same, and in one game, the Barony of Worms may be of the Ibadi faith and the Baranis culture, for example. Who knows? In any case, for most characters who don't fall into a certain specific religious minority or a certain culture or something, where it really wouldn't make sense for them to be the other culture potentially, I can see why they've kind of blocked some of them off. They will actually adapt their story into the faith and culture of their place of birth, and you can see that here. This is Hildegard again. And this time, the Barony of Worms, when she spawns, was actually under Ibadi and Baranis, and that has actually changed her character. So now she is the same kind of like historical story, but she is this other faith version of that character, like an alternate history one, multiverse, however you want to call it these days. And then you can carry on playing this character, but with this slight variation. I think this is really cool. I'm sure some of you will say, no, it should only spawn if the exact requirements are met. We don't want like weird versions. I'm sure you can probably change this in the rule set, but for the most part, I think this is a cool system, actually changing it, because, you know, historically this may have happened. This person may have been born anyway. They might have been brought up in this culture or faith, and then they might have had a version of what they did historically happen, but it would have been based around what they were now versus what historically they were. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. I think this is awesome. I think it's going to be really cool. especially if you get those weird campaigns where a random culture or faith just takes over a massive section of the map. you might get some crazy, you know, like African El Cid or something like that, and see what happens with him as you do out your campaigns. And this is outside of playing them, something that is coming free with the update, which is awesome to see as well. Now, all historical characters spawn this way, not historical landed rulers, again, pointing out that isn't there. Will have a snippet of information attached to them explaining what they did in real life, as we looked at previously. This snippet can be accessed from a widget near their opinion and from their historical character trait. Of course, the destiny that they have in-game is always going to differ from their historical one, but it's fun to compare them nonetheless. So again, as they say here, even if they're playing out a different storyline, because of course, it's going to be very hard for them to play out the exact story they did in real life. Well, it's not really a story, you know. They're not going to play out exactly how they did in real life. You can always just see like, oh, who's this character? You maybe discover him like 20 years after he spawned. And then you can see, look, this is what happened historically, and this is what happened in the actual game itself. One of the things I love about Paradox games, especially with EU4, is that you actually learn about history by playing it. And I know that's probably a bit of a meme. Well, it is a bit of a meme, you know, Paradox players thinking they know history because they've played the games. But especially in EU4, with all the events they had, you could actually learn quite a lot of history from what happened in that game. And even here, you're going to learn about these people that maybe you've never heard of, and then you might go off, read a book about them, and you're just kind of expanding your knowledge. And I think that's really cool. And that is how you're going to be able to learn about them. Now, obviously, you are going to be notified when they appear near you, but you can actually find them. There is a trait, historical character, and when you hover over it, again, that's where you're going to see what their story was. But you can also use the character finder to find all kind of active historical characters on the map. And you can go and have a look around them. You can see here, there's 4 of them active currently in this game, and you can see what they're doing. You see what adventures they're up to. And then, of course, if you hover over historical character for them, you can read about what they did and maybe you want to go find them, something like that. And then, as we were talking about earlier, if you are lucky enough to have one of these characters spawn in your realm, you have 3 options. You can see them here for William Wallace. You can choose to ignore them, just let them carry on adventuring. You actually gain some prestige for doing that. Or you can employ them and get an obligation hook, so they'll come join your court, get up to some fun things. I'm sure William Wallace will be a great commander or something like that. And then, as mentioned earlier, you can actually abandon your dynasty and set out on an adventure as that character. The only time in CK3 where they thought it was fair to do so, as I was saying earlier, it is outside of what usually happens, but I think it is a cool thing to do. You know, you get William Wallace appear and you think, do you know what, it'd be cool to go off, play unlanded gameplay as him, and see what might have happened to him historically, and play out your new kind of adventures, play as that dynasty, and then see what you can get up to in those campaigns. I think that is really fun to do. And then the last thing they really talk about in this section is that obviously the expansion, a lot of it is focused around the Byzantines, and they took extra care to add a few interesting characters from Byzantine history that match this time frame. And these are all characters you are going to be able to play through. And again, you can play as them, have them join your court, or just let them carry on adventuring and getting up to their own shenanigans. And that is historical characters. I think it's going to be great seeing them come into your realm and then put them to use or playing as them. I think it's also going to be fun just seeing what they do. Like if you're playing somewhere, maybe William Wallace spawns up there in Scotland, and then in like 20, 25 years, maybe you're in France, and then suddenly he just like appears with an army doing adventuring or something like that, and you'd be like, wow, what's going on here? And really have one of those weird campaigns that you might remember for a while, where it can be like William Wallace appeared, he came down with an army, took some of my land, landed himself, you know, all this crazy stuff that could happen. And with that, that's the historical characters they're adding. Like I said, there's 100 of these being added, and 4 of them are getting a special mini campaign, and that is going to be called the Story System, and that is coming up in the same DLC, obviously. And what they've done here is add some pre-scripted historical story content for these 4 characters, and this is the first time they've ever really done something like this since way back. They say in the Charlemagne DLC for Crusader Kings 2, I don't remember this, so somebody leave a comment down below, but I guess there was something similar to this in that DLC, although I can't remember it myself, having played quite a bit of Crusader Kings, but there were a lot of systems in that game, so I could have overlooked it. And basically they talk here that as the team from Legends of the Dead moved over to Roads to Power, as they really scaled down, you know, obviously making that DLC, they actually brought that team on, onboarded them, and they set up this system, I guess as like a little bit of like a, you know, getting used to this DLC before they really started putting like serious work into it. And these are the 4 characters they chose. They chose El Cid, Wallada, Hasan Sabbah, and Hereward the Wake. Those are the 4 characters. And then for the rest of this, they're going to talk through the rough story for those 4 characters, what they got up to historically, And then we do know that some of these do have special decisions, because as part of the achievements that they talked about last week, which I did a video on, we do know like El Cid has an achievement based on what decision you choose as him. And I think there was another one as well that has an achievement based on what you decide to do as that character. So yeah, these 4 have got a special kind of mini campaign. And then 2 of them, I believe, have an achievement based on that as well, which is pretty cool to see. Now, what they do call out here, though, is that the size of the content is unevenly distributed, because the people making it had different amounts of time to actually make this content. Again, they were doing this to kind of like onboard people onto this DLC. And what they say here is that El Cid got a like standard amount of this mini campaign, but another character, Hasan Sabbah, actually got a bunch of work. 2 of the designers came together and actually put a bunch of extra time into making content. And then Wallada and Hereward, well, they absolutely swelled in scope, because the designer allocated to this character spent way more time on it than I think they were supposed to, maybe, by the sounds of it. Maybe they were told to do it, and in their spare time, they kept adding content to that character. So yeah, it is a little bit skewed. El Cid has the least amount of this special content, and Hereward has the most amount in this system. I mean, it's all just bonus content, so I don't think it's like a slight on El Cid. I mean, that's probably the most famous one that most people playing Crusader Kings are going to know of. So I'm sure some of you may be like, oh, it's a bit unfair, he didn't get the most out of this system. But at the end of the day, you're just going to enjoy playing as him, so I don't think it really matters. A lot of you are going to tell your own story anyway, rather than kind of following the historical version that happened. And then in the next screenshot, you can actually see the new adventurer bookmark. They talked about this previously. You can see the 4 main characters on there that we've already been discussing, and then a few others as well. So I will say there are the 4 main ones, but they do mention later on there are a few like micro events for a couple of other characters as well. But the first one they're going to talk about is El Cid. As El Cid, you'll go through a small chain of events representing his travels through Iberia after being exiled by his foolishly misled lord, King Sancho the Strong of Castile. As you progress, you'll be given opportunities to show your loyalty or assert your independence. If you remain steadfast and resolute even in exile, King Sancho will doubtless eventually welcome you back into the fold, assuming he lives, of course. Though a more ambitious Rodrigo may set his eyes on the prize of Valencia in the south, they do say here that, you know, his future wife will be available for you to marry, or you can get up to some other shenanigans as well. So yes, there is a little bit there for you to play with El Cid, and it is also there during the Iberian struggle. So bringing in old DLC to kind of experience this to the most, which is pretty cool. The next one being Wallada. Wallada is the last of the Umayyads in 1066, daughter of the Caliph Muhammad of Andalusia, an inheritor of a great legacy and great wealth. Historically, she spent her life writing poetry, tutoring women at a school she founded, and generally causing consternation in her home city of Cordoba. She never married, nor did she have children, though she did take a broad variety of lovers, making her something of an eccentric by the standards of her time. As an adventurer, her story revolves around securing an adopted child, tactical use of seduction and romance, and writing and selling poetry in order to level up her unique violet poet trait and double moon tomb. So there we go, we're getting a specific trait just to this character. That is actually pretty cool that we're getting that. And a special book by the looks of it, which is an artifact. She can also found a literary salon for the ages in a county of her choosing, once she has acquired suitably talented courtiers. So again, there's a little bit of a special campaign there as well. Wallada begins as a scholar with ample starting gold and decent prestige level. As she is quite old in 1066, her story may be inherited by her chosen successor and played for an additional generation. So there you go, even if she dies, you actually get to play her special content as her daughter or son afterwards, which is, again, pretty cool, especially as she is old, so you're not just in a crazy rush to get that finished. You can carry that on. Carry on her legacy if you want to think about it. The next one is Hasan Sabbah. Hasan Sabbah is not a particularly religious teenager in 1066. He is, however, about to become one. After a chance encounter with a preacher, he finds himself radicalized and set on a path to found the deadly Hashasins, eventually becoming the legendary Old Man of the Mountain. He's the guy with the other achievement because the achievement is called Old Man of the Mountain, so there we go, that is one of them. As an adventurer, his story content lets him fast-track the religious conversion of counties. By doing so, he will eventually be summoned to Egypt, convert once more to Nizarism, and take on the fierce might of Seljuk Persia. With the people of the land behind him, or not, depending on how conversion goes, Hasan tries to lead a revolution against the Sunni Turks. Eventually, he may found the assassins, leaving them in a mountain fastness to defend all good Nizaris going forwards. Hasan starts as a scholar, and given the nature of the work set out before him, he will not stay one for long. So I guess you get an event where he switches over to intrigue, and then you get to play out that story if you want to, or change your mind and do something else instead with him. And then the last one is Hereward the Wake. Hereward begins exiled to the continent, but unless there is a player involved in the conquest, he won't stay that way for long. The decisive win of William of Normandy puts a Norman yoke on English necks and begins the elaborate mechanics of the harrying of the north, where Hereward, William, Norman invaders, and Anglo-Saxon lords compete to pacify or incite the country's populace to revolt against the new status quo. As he kills Normans and rallies the locals against their attacker, he will level up his unique trait, becoming a better and better guerrilla fighter in his native fenlands in the east of England. Hereward begins as a freebooter, as historically you could hardly describe him as anything else. That one actually sounds really cool to play as, to be honest. You're just going crazy through England, killing off Normans, ranking up this unique trait. I wonder what bonuses it gives, actually, and then kind of playing out that craziness and then seeing what happens once you've maybe, you know, killed all the Normans off or something like that. So that one actually sounds, I don't know if like the most fun. I am from England, so I'm probably a little bit biased, but this one does sound really cool to play. Probably one I might do a live stream around and kind of see what adventures we can get up to. And then, as I mentioned, there are smaller stories for the other named characters as well. Not as big, just a couple of events here or there. You can see a few of them on the screen at the moment. And especially around the Basileus, he has an introductory event featuring the early murder of his predecessor and a tie-in to the many Roads to Power comics. So yes, if you didn't know, they actually released a comic for this DLC launch. A little bit weird, but you know what? Let them cook, and you know, it was actually pretty interesting to read, so I won't complain about it too much. You can actually go and read that. If you go to the link in the description, you can go to the dev diary and then click on the link and then read through that comic. But there we go. That is some more additional content, especially if you're playing in the Byzantines with the DLC. And then the last one they're going to talk about here is Saward Barn, and he has a small chain forking off of Hereward's content where you can go on to found the colony of New England in its natural, rightful, obvious place on the shores of the Black Sea. I mean, it just makes sense. Like, that is historically where England had the best colonies, in the Black Sea. We all know that to be true, and you can actually play that out as one of these characters, which is crazy, to be honest. That is one of the more wild ones that you can do. But anyway, with all of that, guys, that is all the historical characters that you can see in game. And then, like I say, the 4 that are really getting a good amount of content based around them. And then, as we've just seen, a few others getting little bits here or there that are going to surprise you in your own campaigns. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. As I've said all the way through this, I think this is cool, especially as a free update. I know you have to have the DLC to play as these characters, but even just seeing them on the map and employing them, or just seeing what they get up to, I think is going to be pretty cool. Adding that flavor that we've all been talking about for like 3 or 4 years now, saying the game just needs more stuff going on, more flavor, more like weird stories that can happen when you're playing through your campaigns. And this is the start of us really seeing those features coming into the game as part of a larger DLC. They could have left this out. They almost could have done this as a standalone events DLC or something like that, but it's just in here with everything else for the Roads to Power DLC. So we'll see how it plays once it comes out. But with that, we'll leave it there for today. As always, hit that like button if you've enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new here. I cover a lot of Crusader Kings on the channel. I do live stream campaigns. I do Let's Plays, discussion videos, ranking videos, all that kind of stuff. And I also do similar stuff for Project Caesar, aka EU5, which got announced this year on the forums, and Johan's been giving us early information about what EU5 is going to play like and how the game is kind of been made versus EU4. But with that, we'll leave it there for today, and I'll see you in the next one.